All right, so today we're diving deep into a world that most people probably don't even know exists.
hmm
It's the world of, get this, detection engineering.
Ooh, sounds exciting.
It is, actually. You can think of it as, like, imagine digital detectives, but instead of magnifying glasses and fingerprints, they use code as their weapon, hunting down cyber threats.
Like before they even strike.
Exactly, before they even strike, like
Right.
stopping those data breaches or those big ransomware attacks, before they can even do damage.
Wow, that's really fascinating. So basically they're like kind of like the guardians of the internet.
Absolutely, the unsung heroes, really.
I like that. Unsung heroes of the internet. Okay, so for someone like me who's not exactly a coding whiz, what does a detection engineer like actually do all day? Are they just like staring at screens, waiting for alarms to go off?
Well, I mean, there's probably some of that, right?
Like
But it's so much more than just that. It's really about understanding the mind of an attacker, almost like a digital profiler.
okay.
They have to think like the bad guys, figure out what kind of digital trails a specific attack might leave behind, and then write the code that can, like, sniff those out.
So it's not just about being good at code, it's also like understanding like the psychology of these attackers.
Absolutely. And the tactics they use. It's like a constant cat and mouse game.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay, so now that they have their like code detectives like ready to go, what are they actually searching for? I mean, it can't just be hackers, right? There must be a whole like spectrum of things they're trying to find.
Absolutely, you're right. It's way broader than just those, like, stereotypical hackers in hoodies. Think of it more like three categories, like broad categories. You've got your threats, you've got your anomalies, and then you've got these items of special interest.
Items of special interest? That sounds kind of like spy novel worthy.
Right. I know.
So like what would fall under each of those categories?
Okay, so let's break it down. So threats are like your kind of your classic malicious activity.
Okay.
So it could be malware spreading through the network, or it could be signs of a phishing campaign, those emails trying to trick employees into giving up passwords.
hmm
Anomalies are anything that just seems off. Like, it's not necessarily malicious, but it's just like, wait, this isn't normal. Why is this happening?
Like unusual activity, but not necessarily bad.
Exactly. So it could be like a sudden spike in data leaving the network, or a file suddenly appears where it shouldn't, or like a user logging in at like 3 in the morning when they usually never work that late,
Yeah.
stuff like that.
Okay, and the items of special interest, what are some examples of those?
All right, so this is where it gets, like, really interesting. This could be tracking a specific suspect's activity. It could be finding evidence of sensitive data being leaked, or even, like, proving that someone inside the company is violating policy. But here's the thing. Like, all this detective work, it can't just be random guessing.
Yeah, I was going to say, how do they, like, actually do this? It can't just be, like, throwing darts at a board.
No. It's actually a very systematic process, like a life cycle, that detection engineers follow. And it starts, believe it or not, with research.
Research, like, they're hitting the books, learning all about these, like, digital attacks.
Exactly, right? They dig into threat intelligence reports, which are basically like dossiers on known hacker groups and their tactics.
Okay.
And then they'll also dive into, like, really technical articles, and some of them even experiment with attack tools themselves. They're like, let's see how this works. Let's see what kind of traces it leaves behind.
Wow, they're, like, getting their hands dirty.
They really are. So they're building up this knowledge base, right? And then, based on all that research, they could start forming a hypothesis. It's like an educated guess about, like, okay, if this type of attack happens, we should see these clues in the data.
So, like, if-then statements, basically.
Kind of, yeah. It's more nuanced than that, but you've got the right idea.
Okay.
And once they have that hypothesis, they move into the development phase, which is where they actually start, like, writing the code, writing the queries to search for those specific clues.
So it's like taking those guesses, those if-then statements, and turning them into, like, actual code that the computer can understand.
Exactly. And they're super meticulous about it, too. They test their code against both real and simulated attacks to make sure it's, like, actually catching the bad stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But also, and this is important, not raising too many false alarms.
Right, because, like, you don't want the smoke detector going off every time you make toast.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
all about that balance. So once they're confident that the code's working, it's time for deployment.
Okay, so the code goes live.
Huh?
And that's it, right?
Oh, no. The work doesn't stop there.
Mm-hmm.
It's constantly monitored and tweaked as new threats emerge. Remember, it's this cat and mouse game, right? So the attackers are always trying to find new ways in, so the detection engineers have to be constantly updating their defenses.
So it's like a never-ending cycle.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah.
But it's crucial, right? I mean, think about it. All of our data, our financial systems, our critical infrastructure, it all relies on these detection engineers working behind the scenes, constantly vigilant.
Wow, I'm starting to realize, like, how important this is. But here's a question, like, all this data they're analyzing, where does it even come from? It's not like there's just one giant file labeled like, all network activity sitting somewhere, right?
Yeah. You would think, right? But no, it's actually way more complicated than that. We're talking about logs, like digital footprints left by like every action on a network. So
Right.
every website you visit, every file you access, every email you send, it all generates a record, a log entry.
So it's like a massive amount of data.
Oh yeah, we're talking gigabytes, terabytes, even petabytes in some cases.
That's like mind-boggling. How do they even like sift through all that?
That's where things get really interesting. They rely on specialized tools and automation. Think of it like trying to find a needle in a haystack, but the haystack is like the size of a skyscraper.
Yeah.
You need some serious help.
Yeah, you definitely need some serious help. But you mentioned like the code weapons earlier.
Yes.
You called them rules and signatures. Can you break those down for me? Like, what are they exactly?
So imagine those like spam filters for your email, right?
Mhm.
You know how they can block emails with certain words or phrases?
Mhm.
It's kind of like that, but way, way more sophisticated. They're basically if-then statements for security, right? So like if we see X happening, then flag it as suspicious.
Okay, so it's like setting up rules for the computer to follow.
Exactly. But the thing is, a single attack might leave dozens of subtle traces across the network. So skilled detection engineers can connect those dots and create rules that are incredibly specific. Like they only trigger on real threats, minimizing those false positives.
So it's not just about blocking everything, it's about being smart about it.
Exactly. Exactly. And it's a constant process of refinement, too, because remember, the attackers are always evolving, so the rules have to keep up.
That makes sense. Okay, so they're like experts at finding those like known threats, but what about brand new attacks, like things that nobody's ever seen before?
That's where things get really interesting. That's where you get into behavioral analytics.
Behavioral analytics, what's that?
Okay, so instead of looking for like specific known bad things, this is about looking for anything that deviates from the norm. It's about spotting those anomalies, those things that just seem out of place.
Like what kind of things? I'm having trouble picturing that.
Imagine your bank, right? They see that your credit card is suddenly being used in a country you've never been to.
Yeah.
That's a red flag, right? It's not that they know a specific attack is happening. It's just that that behavior is unusual for you.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So that's how they catch those zero-day attacks, those like brand new exploits that nobody's like documented yet.
Exactly. And it can also help spot insider threats.
Mm.
You know, someone within the organization doing something they shouldn't.
Wow. So it's like they're looking for like patterns in the data, like trying to find anything that just seems off.
Precisely. They're looking for those needles in the haystack. And here's the thing. It's used everywhere. I mean, think about it. Companies use it to protect their data. Governments use it to defend critical infrastructure. Even your devices, like your antivirus software that's powered by detection engineering. But before we get too carried away, we need to address something that I've been thinking about.
Okay.
We've been talking about detection engineering, but what about threat hunting? Are they the same thing? The sources kind of like hint that there's a difference?
You're right. There is a key difference.
Okay.
Think of it this way. Detection engineering is like setting traps for known animals.
Right.
You know their behavior, you know what they're after, so you can set those traps accordingly.
All designed to catch those specific types of threats.
Exactly. Threat hunting, on the other hand, is more like venturing into the jungle. You don't know exactly what you're looking for, but you're actively searching for anything out of the ordinary, anything that suggests something isn't right.
Okay, so if DEs are the trap setters, threat hunters are more like trackers.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. They're not mutually exclusive, though. Think of them as partners. Detection engineers build that baseline security, those automated defenses, while threat hunters proactively seek out the stealthy, novel threats that might slip through the cracks.
It's like a dynamic duo, working together to keep the bad guys at bay.
Exactly.
This is fascinating stuff. But I have a feeling it's not all sunshine and roses, right? There's got to be some serious challenges in this line of work.
Oh, absolutely. Detection engineering is a demanding field, and there are several hurdles that these digital detectives face on a daily basis. One of the biggest is the sheer speed at which new attacks emerge. Hackers are constantly innovating, finding new ways to exploit vulnerabilities and bypass security
It's
measures.
like a constant arms race,
Yeah,
right?
right. Precisely. And then there's the issue of data overload, right? We talked about the enormous volume of logs that they have to sift through. It's only getting worse, too, as our systems generate more and more data every day.
It's like drinking from a fire hose.
Exactly. Too much information can be just as bad as not enough. And then there's the problem of false positives. Every alert, every potential threat needs to be investigated. Too many false alarms can waste time and resources.
Yeah, and I bet it also leads to what's it called, alert fatigue,
Yeah, alert fatigue.
where people start tuning out the warnings because they're so used to them being nothing serious.
Exactly. And then, of course, there's the human element. Even the best code can't account for everything.
Mm.
Detection engineers need to be creative, think outside the box, and anticipate what attackers might do next. It's not just about technical skills.
This has been an incredible look into a world that I knew very little about. But I do have a practical question.
Okay.
Can't you just buy these security rules?
That's a great question.
Why would companies need to have someone build custom ones?
So the answer is, it depends. There are vendors who offer pre-built security rules, and they can be quite effective for catching common, known threats. Think of it like, a basic alarm system for your house. For everyday threats, those pre-made rules are a decent starting point.
Right, but just like a house alarm might not deter a determined thief, those generic rules might not be enough to catch attackers who are specifically targeting your organization.
Exactly. That's where custom rules come into play. Tailor-made defenses for your specific data and systems.
So it's a trade-off, right? The convenience and affordability of vendor rules versus the precision and effectiveness of custom-built ones.
Exactly. In reality, most organizations use a combination of both. They might start with vendor rules for, like, general protection, and then build custom rules for their highest priority assets.
Makes sense.
It's all about finding the right balance for their needs and their risk tolerance.
Okay, but with all this data and this complexity and the constant pressure to keep up with the new threats, how do detection engineers avoid burning out? It sounds incredibly demanding.
Well, that's where automation becomes crucial. It's like giving detection engineers superpowers. It allows them to do more with less.
So instead of manually sifting through mountains of data, they can write scripts to do the heavy lifting for them.
Exactly. They can automate tasks like, correlating data from different sources, filtering out the noise, even generating reports to show how security is improving over time. It frees up their time and their mental energy to focus on the tasks that require, human intelligence, human intuition.
Okay, so automation is key to preventing burnout and keeping DEs sane. But I can't help but ask, is AI going to replace detection engineers entirely?
The big question, right? Is AI going to take over the world? The short answer is, not yet. At least not entirely. AI is an incredibly powerful tool for detection engineering. It's great at spotting patterns that humans might miss, analyzing vast amounts of data at lightning speed, and even predicting potential threats. But AI still needs guidance from humans. It needs those detection engineers who understand the context, can interpret the results, and distinguish between a real threat and a false alarm.
So it's not about AI replacing humans, it's about AI augmenting human capabilities.
Exactly. The future of detection engineering is likely to be a collaboration between human ingenuity and artificial intelligence, a dynamic partnership that's constantly evolving to try to stay one step ahead of the bad guys.
Well, this has been an incredible glimpse into the world of cyber defense.
Yeah, it's an exciting field.
It certainly is. But before we get too carried away, we need to take a moment to gather our thoughts. When we come back, we'll continue our exploration of the world of detection engineering. We'll delve deeper into some of the more technical aspects, discussing how DEs actually go about building those custom rules and signatures we talked about. Stay with us.
Welcome back. Before we took a moment to reflect, we were discussing the crucial role of detection engineers in today's digital world. Let's delve deeper into the technical side now and explore how they actually build those custom-made defenses we touched upon.
Yeah, those custom rules and signatures, right? Like we talked about those being like tailor-made security systems for specific organizations.
Yeah.
It sounds super complex. Where do they even begin? What's the starting point?
It all really starts with understanding the specific threats that an organization faces. Remember, detection engineers are kind of like investigators, right?
Yeah.
They need to profile potential attackers,
Okay.
understand their motives, their tactics, the tools they might use.
So it's like building a psychological profile, but for like cyber criminals.
Yeah, that's a good way to think about it.
Okay.
So they often begin by like reviewing threat intelligence reports, right? Which, provide detailed information on known hacker groups and their methods.
Okay.
They might also study past attacks that have targeted similar organizations to identify common patterns and indicators of compromise. Once they have a good grasp of the threat landscape, they can start formulating a hypothesis,
Okay.
right? And ask themselves, what specific actions would an attacker likely take to achieve their goal?
Mm-hmm.
And what traces would those actions leave in the data?
So they're working backward, kind of. Like
Yeah.
starting with the potential crime and then figuring out like the steps an attacker would need to take to get there.
Precisely.
Okay.
And each step, each action, right, represents a potential opportunity for detection.
Okay.
So the detection engineer's job is to figure out which of those actions are the most reliable indicators of malicious activity.
So it's not just looking for any sign, it's looking for the most telling signs.
Right. They don't want to just look for any sign. They want to find the most telling signs, the ones that are least likely to be triggered by, like, innocent activity.
Right. They're looking for those red flags that are almost like impossible to ignore.
Exactly. It's about minimizing those false alarms while maximizing the chances of catching, the real bad guys. It's a delicate balancing act. So once they've, developed a strong hypothesis, they can start translating that into code, right?
Okay.
Creating a rule that will, like, trigger an alert when those specific conditions are met.
So if they see A, B, and C happening in the logs, that sets off the alarm bells, and it's time to investigate.
You got it. But it's not as simple as just, like, writing a few lines of code. The rule needs to be precise, efficient, and robust enough to handle the, constantly evolving nature of cyber attacks. Right, because, like, attackers are always coming up with new tricks and new techniques, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the rules, they not only need to catch the attackers, they need to do so reliably without being, fooled by attempts to disguise their activity or being bogged down by false alarms.
Mm-hmm.
This is where, the true artistry of detection engineering really comes in.
Chase, it's not just about, like, writing code. It's about, like, understanding the data inside and out, knowing, like, the nuances of different systems and crafting these rules that are both elegant and effective.
You've hit the nail on the head there.
So are all custom rules kind of created equal, or are there different, like, types of rules?
That's a great question. It's definitely not a one-size-fits-all situation.
Right. The type of rule, it really depends on the threat they're trying to detect, right? And the data that's available.
Mm-hmm.
So some rules are very specific, right? They're designed to look for a precise sequence of events,
Okay.
like a known malware signature, for example,
Mm-hmm.
or a specific command being executed.
So if they see that exact, like, code being run or that specific file being accessed, that's a clear sign of trouble.
Exactly. But other rules might be more behavioral, right?
Oh.
Focused on identifying anomalies or deviations from normal patterns.
So if they see an unusually large amount of data leaving the network or a user logging in at like a strange time, those are like red flags worth investigating.
You got it. And some rules combine both approaches,
Wow.
looking for both specific indicators and unusual behavior.
So it's like if they see a specific command being run, but it's being run by a user who doesn't normally have access to that system, that's like major red alert.
Precisely. It's about layering those defenses, creating a security net that's as tight as possible. But creating the rules is only half the battle, right?
Right, because you could have like the most brilliant rules in the world, but if they don't actually work as intended, then what's the point?
Exactly.
Right.
Testing is an absolutely crucial part of the process.
Right.
Detection engineers need to make sure that their rules are actually catching the intended threats, right? Without generating too many false positives.
Mm-hmm.
It's like running drills to make sure your defenses hold up under pressure.
So they like simulate attacks to see if the rules work as expected.
That's right. There are different approaches to testing.
Yeah.
They might use like real malware samples or attack tools to see if the rule triggers correctly.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes, using real malware is too risky, so they'll use like simulated attacks or they'll use synthetic data to test the rule's effectiveness.
So it's like a fire drill. You're practicing for a real fire, but you're not actually setting anything ablaze.
Exactly. Another critical part of testing is tuning the rule. Right. They might find that the rule is too sensitive, right? Triggering too many false positives.
Mm-hmm.
Or it might be too specific, right? Missing some variations of the attack that they're trying to detect.
So it's like finding that sweet spot.
Hmm.
That perfect balance between like catching the bad guys and not crying wolf too often.
That's a great way to put it.
Mhm.
And this tuning process can be quite iterative, involving a lot of, trial and error analysis, collaboration with other security experts.
So it's not just about like writing code and setting loose. It's a continuous process
Hmm.
of testing and refining and making sure that these rules are as effective as possible.
Absolutely. And it's important to remember that even the best rules need to be updated regularly,
Mm-hmm.
right? The threat landscape is constantly evolving.
Yeah.
New attack methods are emerging all the time.
So it's like an arms race,
Hmm.
constantly like upgrading your defenses to stay one step ahead of
Yeah.
the attackers.
Precisely. And that's what makes detection engineering such a challenging and rewarding field, right? You're always learning, always adapting, and always striving to make the digital world a safer place.
It sounds incredibly demanding, but also incredibly important.
One thing remains constant: the need for skilled and dedicated professionals who are passionate about protecting our digital world.
Well said. You know, we've covered so much ground today, but I feel like we've only just scratched the surface. There's still so much more to explore.
There's always more to learn in the world of cybersecurity. It's a constantly evolving field.
It definitely is. But for now, we're going to take a quick break. When we return, we'll dive even deeper into the world of detection engineering and threat hunting, exploring the specific challenges these professionals face and the future trends that are shaping the field. Stay with us. Welcome back to our deep dive into the world of detection engineering. It's been quite a journey so far. We've, explored the ins and outs of this fascinating field, from the meticulous detective work of like building custom rules to the strategic interplay between detection engineering and threat hunting. But as with any field, it's always exciting to look ahead, right? And see what the future holds. What's on the horizon for detection engineering? What trends should we be like keeping a close eye on?
Well, as you might imagine, the world of cybersecurity, right? It's in constant flux, always changing.
Hmm.
Detection engineering is no exception. One of the most significant trends we're seeing is the rise of automation and AI.
Yeah, yeah.
These technologies they're poised to like reshape the fields in some pretty profound ways.
We touched on that a little bit earlier, but it's clear that AI is like a game changer. So how do you see these technologies actually shaping the future of DE?
In many ways, for one, AI can like automate a lot of the tasks that DEs currently handle manually.
Hmm.
Things like analyzing logs, correlating data from various sources, even identifying potential threats.
Hmm.
This will free up BEs to focus on like more strategic work,
Okay.
like threat hunting, research,
Right.
developing new and innovative detection techniques.
So it's not about replacing like human expertise. It's about empowering those experts to be even more effective.
Precisely. Think of AI as a powerful assistant, like a,
Right.
a force multiplier that allows DEs to do more with less,
Uh-huh.
right? It can handle the heavy lifting, the repetitive tasks, while the human experts focus on the things that require, creativity, intuition, and strategic thinking.
That makes a lot of sense. But what about the potential downsides of AI? I mean, we hear a lot about things like AI bias, algorithms making mistakes, and the possibility of like unintended consequences.
Mhm.
Are those valid concerns in the world of cybersecurity?
Absolutely. It's crucial to remember that AI is a tool.
Right.
And like any tool, it can be used for good or for evil.
Hmm.
In the wrong hands, AI-powered cyber attacks could be incredibly devastating.
Yeah, it's almost like giving a super weapon to the bad guys.
In a way, yes. And that's why it's so important for the security professionals to be just as savvy with AI, right? To
Yeah.
use it to bolster defenses and to anticipate and counter those AI-powered attacks.
So it's an arms race, but with AI as the new weapon of choice.
Precisely. And that's why the role of the human expert, the DE, right? It's more important than ever. They need to understand how AI works,
Hmm.
its strength, its limitations, and how to use it effectively and responsibly.
So the future of DE is not just about like code, it's about understanding and managing this powerful new technology.
That's a great way to put it. And it's about staying ahead of the curve, right? Constantly learning, adapting to the ever-changing threat landscape.
Okay, so AI is a big one. What other trends are kind of on your radar?
Another major trend is the increasing complexity of attacks,
Hmm.
right? As our systems become more interconnected and attackers grow more sophisticated, the attack surface, right? It's expanding exponentially.
So it's not just about like protecting individual computers or networks anymore. It's about defending like entire ecosystems with countless points of vulnerability.
Exactly. And that means that DEs need like a deeper understanding of how systems work, how they interact, and how they can be exploited.
So it's not just about being like a code expert anymore. It's about being a systems thinker, a big picture strategist.
You're absolutely right. And it's also about being able to collaborate effectively with other security professionals
Right.
to share information and insights and work together to build, truly comprehensive defenses.
Okay, so complexity is rising, AI is on the rise,
Yeah.
and collaboration is becoming more crucial than ever. Anything else that we should be like keeping an eye on?
One more trend worth mentioning is the growing importance of cloud security,
Hmm.
right? As more and more organizations shift their data and applications to the cloud, the attack surface is shifting along with them.
So it's not just about like securing your own like physical infrastructure anymore. It's about understanding and managing the security of those cloud environments.
Precisely. And that presents a whole new set of challenges for Ds. They need to understand how cloud services work, how they're configured, and how they can be effectively monitored and secured.
It's like learning a whole new language, a whole new way of thinking about security.
You could say that.
Yeah.
It's a challenge that many DEs are still grappling with,
Mm-hmm.
but those who can master it will be in high demand
Mm-hmm.
as cloud adoption continues to accelerate.
Wow, this has been an incredible deep dive. I'm feeling both like inspired and a little overwhelmed by the sheer like scope and complexity of this field. One thing is certain though, detection engineering is not for the faint of heart.
You're absolutely right. It takes a special kind of person to thrive in this environment. You need to be technically brilliant, endlessly curious, incredibly persistent. But for those who have the passion and the drive, it's an incredibly rewarding career.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit. Our listener might be thinking, this all sounds great, but how do I become a detection engineer? What's the path to get into this field?
Well, it's a specialized field for sure, but also very rewarding. If you're into cybersecurity and you enjoy solving problems, detection engineering could be a good fit.
What kind of background do you need? Education?
A good foundation in computer science or something similar is definitely helpful. You need to understand how computers work, networks, software. But it's not just about technical
I was
skills.
going to ask about that. It sounds like you need more than just knowing how to code.
For sure. Detection engineering is also about understanding how people behave, not just technology. Attackers, they're always looking for ways to exploit human weaknesses, so you have to kind of think like them.
So a bit of psychology involved.
Absolutely. Understanding how they think, what they're after, the techniques they might use, it's all important.
What about experience? Can you just learn all this in school, or do you need real-world experience?
Practical experience is invaluable. A lot of detection engineers, they start in other cybersecurity roles like security analysts or incident responders.
Mhm.
That gives them a chance to see real attacks, see how they played out, learn how to detect and respond to them.
So you're saying someone fresh out of college probably wouldn't jump straight into a detection engineer role.
It's possible, but it's more common to get some experience in other areas of cybersecurity first. That real-world experience helps you develop, the critical thinking, the intuition. It's really valuable.
Makes sense. Our source material mentioned a few specific technical skills that seem important. What about those?
One that jumps out is rule tuning. It's basically, well, remember those detection rules we talked about?
Yeah.
Rule tuning is about making those rules as good as they can be, adjusting those parameters, making sure you're catching the right stuff.
So it's not just writing the rule, it's constantly refining it.
Exactly. You need to understand how each part of the rule affects what it does and analyze the data to see if it's working the way you want.
Sounds like a lot of trial and error.
It can be, but that's what's exciting about it. Always learning, always experimenting, trying to stay one step ahead.
Our source also talked about network security. Why is that so important for detection engineers?
Think of a network like, I don't know, a highway. Data is always moving back and forth, and attackers are trying to hijack that flow or, inject malicious traffic. Detection engineers need to understand how networks work, how to monitor that traffic. You've got to be able to see those anomalies, those cars going the wrong way, and how to spot anything that looks suspicious.
What about endpoint security? I know that's a big deal these days.
It is. Endpoints like laptops, desktops, phones, they're often the main targets. They're the gateways to all that valuable data. So you need strong detection capabilities at the endpoint level. Detection engineers have to know how to monitor what's happening on those endpoints, analyze the logs, create rules to detect and respond to bad stuff happening on those devices.
Wow, it sounds like you need a ton of different skills to be a detection engineer. Any other must-haves?
Yeah, our source mentions scripting and programming.
Yeah.
Knowing languages like Python or PowerShell can be a huge plus.
Why is that? I mean, I get why coding would be important for those detection rules, but what else?
Well, sometimes you got to go beyond the pre-built tools.
Hmm.
You might need to create your own custom scripts, analyze data in a specific way, automate tasks, or even respond to threats immediately.
So it's like, if you can't find the right security gadget, you just build your own.
Huh, exactly. And finally, our source really stressed the importance of vulnerability management.
Can you explain that for our listeners who might not be familiar? What is it, and why does it matter for detection engineers?
It's basically the process of finding, assessing, and fixing security weaknesses. Think of it like checking your house for, I don't know, cracks in the foundation or loose roof tiles. You want to fix those problems before someone can exploit them.
So how does that tie into detection engineering?
Well, a lot of times attackers will use known vulnerabilities to get into systems. Detection engineers need to be aware of those vulnerabilities and create rules that can spot someone trying to use them.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the one key takeaway that you'd like our listener to remember?
I think the most important thing to remember is that detection engineering, it's not a set it and forget it type of deal. It's an ongoing process, a continuous cycle of learning, adapting, and improving. And it's a process that requires human expertise, creativity, and a genuine passion for safeguarding our digital world.
Beautifully put. And on that note, we'll bring this deep dive to a close. But I encourage our listener, to keep exploring, keep learning, and keep asking questions. The more we understand about the threats we face and the techniques we can use to defend against them, the safer we'll all be in this increasingly digital world. Thanks for joining us.